Delighted to be joined this evening in the Lord's Pavilion. We're here in the committee room with Mark Ramprakash and Naynesh Desai. Mark, obviously existing club president. Naynesh, your recommendation as president-elect. Mark, I'm going to start with you. You've had 2 years in the term of president. How much have you enjoyed your time, and how proud were you to be nominated as president?
Well, hugely proud. I was a Middlesex under 10, I think, and came through the Colts, signed at 17, played 14 seasons for the club. Very, very happy to have come back and played a role in the coaching of the club. I'm an ex-player, and I want the club to do well, and I'm very lucky to contribute. But I remember when Mike Selby took me out on the balcony at Durham and sort of said, hey, how about it? I was just so taken aback, but absolutely delighted. I realised that the role of president is hugely influential, and it's a very important position PR-wise for the club. It has a lot of status. It doesn't necessarily have a power to it to get things done, but I think it's hugely influential in terms of dealing and acting as a bridge, perhaps, with the board, the supporters, and the players. And so, I've sort of tried to do that. But I've always been aware of, when you play with Middlesex at Lords, you're aware of tradition.
Yes.
And I've always been aware of the traditions of the club. We had Don Bennett as a coach, but I remember, guys back in that time, former players who would be around. And so you're always aware of how important traditions are, and especially with a club like Middlesex at Lords.
What have you most enjoyed about the role, and in terms of what you've got out of it and what you've managed to deliver?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, despite the fact that it has been a challenging time for the club. And I guess one of the things I've really enjoyed is attending board meetings and being party to the discussions in and around those challenges, which have been significant. And we all know that the landscape in cricket at the moment is changing hugely, and as a club, we're going to have to adapt to that. So there's been a lot of good work done by the board, a lot of people. There's been some good discussions, and to try and navigate the club through these sort of turbulent times, if you like, is tricky. And I have to say that there's been some really good work done by Andrew Cornish, Ila Sharma, Richard Sykes, the chair, and many others. But I think that over the 2 years, you can see that the club has stabilised, and I think that's slightly manifested in the way that Alan Coleman has been able to bring some new people to the club in Ben Geddes and young Gohar. And of course Kane Williamson as well, so let's not forget. So there's 3 exciting players there, and so I think that's been really enjoyable to be party to the board meetings, but equally to interact with the supporters, which is so important. And they're very knowledgeable, they're very loyal, and they're very passionate about Middlesex. So that's been a really important part. And you may have seen me schmoozing in the committee room now and again, but I don't do that very well. So that's also been enjoyable.
Ramps, you mentioned earlier that Mike Selby had asked you to take over the presidency from him. That kind of follows in a long succession line, if you like, of very well-known cricketing legends at Middlesex: Mike Selby, John Embury, Clive Radley, obviously yourself. You've chosen to break from tradition slightly and not name a kind of household Middlesex cricketing name in Naynesh. What is it about Naynesh that you see makes him the perfect fit to take over your presidency?
Well, I think at the start of it, when I was thinking about the successor, and I thought long and hard about that, and of course tradition would have it as an ex-player, so who more relevant to me than would be Mike Gatton, who I've got so much to be thankful for. As a young 17-year-old, joined the staff, and he was England captain at the time, Middlesex captain, one of the best batsmen in the world, and he's been hugely influential on my playing career. So I've got so much to be thankful to Mike for, that he was the obvious person for me, and it would have been a lovely thing for me to hand the reins over to him. However, he is on the board, he was chairman of the cricket committee, and he was already contributing to the club in such a large way. So I then thought, okay, what else? Now I could think of lots of players who would do a very, very good job of representing the club in the way that I've described. But I think being party to the discussions around cricket, around the club, but also English cricket at the moment, we're seeing change like we've never seen before. And actually, I thought of Naynesh because I don't think I know of anyone as well qualified to take on the position of president. And I should say at this moment that I did encourage Naynesh to go for the role of chair, and he got to the last three. It was a very close run thing. Of course, Richard is doing a fantastic job as chair, but that shows Naynesh's enthusiasm to want to contribute to the club. He's been a lifelong member, a lifelong fan, I should say, for a very long time, since he was a kid, which was quite a long time ago. If I think about his qualifications, as I say, I mentioned he's follower of Middlesex, lifelong follower of the club. He's been in the legal profession for 39 years. He has supported many Middlesex beneficiaries, Phil Tufnell, Angus Fraser, Mike Gatting, myself. So he's known to people in the club in that regard. He has served on the Durham board for 6 years, a board, by the way, that's been very successful in moving Durham forward. He is very well connected in the cricketing world, both in this country and in India and in other parts of the world as well. So he's incredibly well connected. And so I couldn't think of someone who is better connected to help contribute to the club, not just as an ex-player, but actually someone with real expertise and helping, being another really intelligent person with a lot of skills to add to the board that is already very capable. But I think Richard Sykes as chair, would value as many good people at the club as we can get. And so thinking long and hard about it, I felt like those were very, very strong credentials. And I must say that I think it's only right that the members ask questions about this process. And so I really value the opportunity to explain my thinking that, I realise the importance of tradition, but equally I want to recognise that in this modern day, the type of cricketing landscape that we live in, we may have to adapt and be flexible, and I think this is a very forward-looking appointment.
Thank you, Mark. Naynesh, first and foremost, welcome to Lords. Mark's given you a glowing reference there. Tell us a little bit about yourself. For the members out there that aren't familiar with you, Mark's obviously explained a little bit about your background in cricket and your passion and love of Middlesex. For those that aren't aware of you, give us a bit of background, tell us about yourself.
So first of all, a big thank you to Mark, because I think it took a lot of nerve to break the tradition and to nominate somebody who would not fit in the traditional stereotype of who should be president. Because most clubs, the president tends to be an ex-player who's contributed towards the club. When Mark first approached me about it, I thought it was a joke. In the same way, and he's been trying to get me involved in Middlesex for quite a few years. About 18 months or so ago, he came to me, he said, we need a new chair at Middlesex. And I kept on throwing names at him. I said, so-and-so, so-and-so. What I hadn't appreciated, he was trying to drag me into the process. And I'm grateful for that. It was a great learning experience, and I'm glad Richard is doing the job. I've had chats with him. Ultimately we're all here because we want the club to succeed, we want the sport to succeed. And whatever I can do to help in that process, I'll gladly do. So as Mark said, I have been following Middlesex since about 1976. Mark asked me the question just a few minutes ago. I said I could almost name the starting lineup for 1976 because I used to come with my school friends. We'd sit in the Compton stand over there when it used to be that old open stand. And we'd particularly Roland Butcher was the big name then, Graham Barlow. My favourite was Clive Radley. People always thought that's an odd choice, and then we had some great visiting bowlers. You had Vincent van der Baal, you had Wayne Daniel, you also had Norman Cowans. Norman Cowans played a lot of his club cricket in and around Wembley, so we'd come across him. So it was great to be invited to be part of this process. Now, I know the role of a president is not formally defined. I've looked it up to see what are the duties, there's nothing there. What it does do, it gives me a free hand to assist whoever needs my help, whether it's the commercial department, whether it's opening up the sport to others in the county and elsewhere. And that's what I'm very interested in. That's what I'd like to do. And with Mark's help, because he's promised to keep a guiding hand over me, I hope that we can do something together. I still want Mark to be very much involved in this process. He knows a lot about Middlesex, he knows a lot about cricket, knows a lot about sport, and a lot about life. So
I think it's safe to say he'll be around. So Naynesh, you've got 2 years in the term, if ratified obviously at the AGM by the members. What message would you like to put out there to Middlesex members ahead of that AGM in terms of what are you actually hoping to kind of bring to the role, and what are you hoping will be your legacy after 2 years as president?
I think legacy is a bit too far away to think about. But what I want to do, as I said, Fletcher, is I want the club to succeed. But more importantly, I want the club to open up opportunities. Government schools have lost playing fields over the last few years. When I was at school, we had 5 soccer pitches, cricket pitches, every sport you could play. Today, the same schools don't have any playing fields. So I went to school at Copeland, and we had huge playing fields at the back, rugby, cricket, football. Today, all of that's gone for development. You have a couple of gyms, and that's about it. So unless Middlesex encourage the clubs and so on to get involved so the facilities are open to everybody, I can see the sports will slowly die down. It'll become elitist, which is the big complaint we've had, that it's becoming a very elitist sport. If you're not at public school, your access is very limited. Also, you want to be a bit more welcoming, because when I played, and I played very bad cricket, like I played golf, I came across so many Southeast Asian clubs, Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi, where the talent was immense, but either through cultural difficulties, language difficulties, they weren't prepared to go beyond their own clubs or their own little leagues. And that's a shame, because I think the sport's meant to be open to everybody. It also needs to be opened up to women, to disabled people, and all of that are things where I would like to feel that we can help. And I'd also like Middlesex to be on a sounder financial footing. I know there'll be a payout from the sale of the 100, but we need to look long term. We're one of the few counties the only county which doesn't have a ground. We're reliant upon Lords, and as a consequence, we're very limited in what we can do. We need to be more accessible to members. Lords is still very intimidating if you come in. Even now, I was frightened that the guys at the gate might hold me up, right? Because that's been the experience in the past with those white coats. But you want it to be more welcoming. You want it to be a club where people, feel they belong. They can come in, they can explore opportunities, and let us know what's wrong, what needs to be changed.
Naynesh, that's outstanding. Thanks ever so much. It sounds like you've got a huge amount of passion, not only for the club, but for the role. Mark, thank you. I can see every reason why you've recommended Naynesh. So I hope that's really helped members have a better understanding as to why you've recommended Naynesh. Rams, I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the members in saying thank you for all you've done in your term as president. It's not quite over yet, so you've got a bit more work ahead of you. And Naynesh, all being well, very much look forward to welcoming you as president of the club. But thank you both for joining us.